Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. It's the, I don't know what date it is actually. It is the 17th of April. Every day blends into one. 17th of April, 2020. And this is number 13. I'm joined today by Gregg Lang, by Chris Leyland, and by Dianne Pattison. And for those who don't know, Chris has been on the podcast before, so I think you've all recognised Chris and you've seen Chris on the morning markets before, but you may not have seen Dianne and Gregg before. So Gregg, Dianne, welcome to your first podcast. But also, before we get into today's agenda, maybe the two of you could just give a quick 10, 20-second introduction about who you are and what you do at True Potential.
Gregg, would you like to go first? Age before beauty?
I was going to say ladies first, but yes, I'll jump in first, Dianne, on that basis. So, hi everyone. My name is Gregg Lang. I am head of True Potential Advisor Services. I've been with True Potential for nearly 9 years now, and I'm hoping the lockdown's over soon because my anniversary's very near, and I don't want to celebrate another milestone or achievement on my own. So, yes. Nice to be on the session today. Over to you, Dianne.
Morning, everybody. I'm Dianne Pattison. I'm the head of delivery for True Potential Group. I've been with True Potential 13 years coming up. Luckily, mine's July, so I'm hoping I've got a little while before I have to celebrate, and I hope it's not alone.
Yeah. Do you two expect presents when you hit milestones? Is that why you want to be in the office?
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is that customary?
I don't know. I've True Potential's what? It'll be 14 years old this year. 13 years old it'll be. So, and I haven't had a present. So.
That's because we're not in the office, Dan.
Oh, of course. Yes, fair enough. And welcome back as well, Chris. I think everyone knows, as I mentioned at the start, you work in the investment management team, and you definitely need no introduction. You're obviously a superstar, Chris. Really, what I wanted to do, ladies and gents who are listening today, was change the agenda ever so slightly, and that's why I've brought Gregg and Dianne in, which was really just to talk a bit more about True Potential as well. Obviously, we will cover the markets and the economic update as well, but I wanted to bring Gregg and Dianne, as they both mentioned, Gregg coming up to 9 years and Dianne coming up to 13 years, stalwarts in the firm, as is Chris. And I wanted them to give you a different outlook on what goes on at True Potential and indeed what we're up to right now during the lockdown periods and, what business is like in April and beyond. So really, before we get into that, you may have seen from myself yesterday that we launched our annual report from 2019, and we sent that to all of our 4,000 advisors who work in True Potential and to our several thousand clients who are end investors at TP. So just really to give a couple of highlights from 2019. 2019 was a fantastic year for True Potential. We recorded a 20% increase in our turnover to £145 million and a 36% increase in our profits to £48 million. Our sales were 2.7 billion. So really the point of sharing a couple of those figures like that is just to say, how well True Potential is doing from a financial background. That's really important for us, and it's really important hopefully for you as end investors to bear that in mind, because it shows that the firm's well capitalized. It shows that we're making profit, which we can then redistribute. It also shows that we can continue to build on our success in terms of the technology and in terms of the offering, which I'm going to ask Chris, Dianne and Gregg to talk about in just a moment. As we look at quarter one, obviously quarter one's been almost a quarter of two halves, to use an old kind of football phrase. Really, January and the beginning of February were fantastic in terms of markets, in terms of growth. And then obviously, as the COVID pandemic came across, that did influence markets. We saw some very volatile times, which Chris, Jeff and Mark have talked about on previous podcasts and on their morning market updates. And hopefully what we'll talk about today is maybe a bit of a return to less of this volatility and starting to level things out. We certainly are seeing some great recovery. So as we look at our Q1 figures, our profits nearly touched on 15 million. We did 14.9 million EBITDA. and 41.3 million turnover and 990 million pounds of sales. And again, they're fantastic figures. But the point of me sharing those figures isn't to boast, isn't to say, look how well we're doing. It's not that at all. It's to say that your money and your businesses, if you're an advisor, could not be in a safer place than they are at True Potential. And we're using that money for good as well. If you look at the work Peter Bold talked about last week with the C19 Business Pledge, where we're a founding member of that, nearly 1.5 million, 1.6 million employees out there are now protected by initiatives such as the C19 Business Pledge. If we look at the causes we support, we've supported Tyndale Hospice this year, we've supported Cash for Kids. Today we are going to be supporting St Cuthbert's Hospice as well. We're going to be delivering more than 4,000 different food parcels around the United Kingdom using our advisors out there. So we're using our positive figures to create a more positive change out there for both the community, but also for the industry as well. I think it's important to remember that once all this settles down, life goes on. And we've talked about, markets need to go on, business needs to go on, and True Potential very much will be doing that and looking after your money for the very long term. So thank you, everybody, for reading the report, and thank you, everybody, for trusting your assets with True Potential. It means a great deal to us. Greg, just to jump across to 2019 for a second and look at the report. Were there any particular highlights from you in terms of initiatives that we did for clients or for our advisors?
Yeah, I think, Daniel, especially for, say, the advisor community, we, went around the UK. It seems like a long time ago we were allowed to travel. But we visited all, 40 different seminar sessions or workshops around the UK to thousands of attendees. I'm very much looking forward to hopefully doing them again later this year, because it really does give you that sort of, touch tight and face-to-face communication with the advisors. But I'm going to try not do a Preti Patel, and I'll try and get this number right. In 2019, 217,803,158 pounds, which is, I think, right, is the exact number that we paid our financial advisors in 2019. So right the way down to the pound. And I think what's impressive with that number is obviously it's a very large number to get your head wrapped around, but also we pay our advisors every single day. So without fail, in 2019 on a daily basis, whether it was a penny or a £10,000 payment, it was paid out each and every single day, which is fantastic really for the advisor services team. And if we look at communication with our advisors, our clients, are another large number here, but 108,738, which is the amount of phone calls and emails that we had with our advisors and their clients last year. So really big, high numbers, and took somebody, clever to count it all up, and certainly wasn't me.
And I think that scale's really interesting, Greg, because I think when we've been talking about business as usual, that's continued as we go into 2020, and that's really important for our advisors out there. The fact that they can count on us and the systems which are in place to pay them every day, but also to give them that type of access and that communications, which means all of their clients, all end investors at True Potential can log in every day, can use all of the technology. And Greg, I know later on we're going to talk about you and where you physically are right now. For the more eagle-eyed, you'll notice that Greg's still in head office. He's one of our essential Site 2 team there. So that's not Greg's house. He hasn't stole the glass and the wood, or maybe he has.
Well,
but, yeah.
You certainly stole my joke for later on, which was about the interior designer back at home. So thanks for that one.
No, Greg, if it's a good joke, we should use it again. So just store it up there, mate. We'll play it again later. Greg mentioned, Dianne, Greg mentioned the ability to pay our advisors every day and match their fees. You helped with the development team last year to launch quite a minor development, which was the launch of a new platform.
very, very small, Dan. I'm not sure anybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Flippantly, though, I genuinely don't know how many people know about it, because what you often see in the press is a lot around who gets things wrong, where it's going wrong, who the big players are. And we're a huge player and nobody really knows what we do behind the scenes. But yes, we might have alluded to it, but we built a platform, a whole platform within, I would say, 18 months really from the planning phase. There was a huge planning phase. We had to understand what we were doing, where it may or may not have worked, contingencies, and build it from there. But yeah, within 2019, there were a relatively small number of developers involved in taking the data, the assets, all of the information that we had that was held on a different custodian and migrated to True Potential's own platform. And yes, when I've jokingly said it was a small task, I think people might think it was a small task because there was no press around it at all. And that for me is a huge thing, because if nobody's known about it, we did something very, very right.
Yeah, and that was certainly one of the business aims when we moved across. For those who aren't aware, a platform is a bit of technology which effectively houses your funds, your investments, puts them into the correct tax wrappers, and then make sure that they're invested in the right funds with the right amount of units. For those who want disbursement, say you're taking some income from your pension, the platform handles that. It also handles things such as top-ups and things such as our impulse save technology. So really, for that's where, more than £11 billion of your money sits right now. And I think Dianne's right. It was very understated in terms of the release going out there. But that was one of our aims, was to quietly go about our business and do that development. And the good news is really, Dianne, when we look at that, it's worked perfectly well. It's worked brilliantly, in fact. And kind of to cross over from an advisor point of view, which Gregg mentioned, across to an end investor point of view, the platform, it works on a daily basis, doesn't it, Dianne? If you could just talk about what it maybe does for an end investor in terms of paying their income, in terms of dealing with top-ups and things.
Yeah, so absolutely. The end user has a client portal that they can log into daily, and that'll take them anything from creating a new investment, new cash, a transfer of an existing investment from a particular provider onto the True Potential platform, through to the maintenance of their assets. So they will say they'll have daily updates in terms of what's happening within the portfolios that they might be invested in. They can impulse save. One of the biggest features that we have is the ability for a client to log on and impulse save anything from £1. So those investors that might not have a huge amount of money to invest, there is no difference to us between somebody that has got a huge wealth behind them versus somebody that might have an auto enrolment pension, whereby it is salary sacrifice going into that pension. If they want to top that up, they can do that 24 hours a day. Everything is available for them 24/7.
Yeah, no, and I think that's been really important, and I think we've seen a lot of comments from clients, both positive and negative at times, over the last couple of months, when they've had the ability to track their valuations on their mobile phones or on their websites via their client portals as well. So some people have been watching this volatility where one day you're up, one day you're down.
I wasn't sure whether to mention that bit, Dan.
No, well, I think it's an important one because it's the flip side of transparency. I think True Potential are hugely transparent in terms of our dealings, in terms of how we run our business, but also in how we let clients access their investments. And you're right, Dianne, you made a nice point before about it doesn't matter if a client is, say, wealthy or less wealthy. It doesn't matter if they've got £1 million or £1. Our systems don't differentiate that. We wrote a report a few years ago called the Democratization of Savings, which good technology lets you do. It doesn't. It's not biased against a person with £1 or £1 million, and that's been good. I think being transparent is good because people have been able to track their investments. It's never nice tracking your investments down. If I go for me as an end investor, I haven't logged in up until a couple of days ago for about 4 or 5 weeks because I didn't want to depress myself.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. I knew the markets were pushing down, but indeed I knew that this wasn't a problem with the markets. It wasn't a fault with the markets, with industry. It's as a result of a pandemic going on. a pandemic we can't give a time on, but we've seen as it started to flatten out, people are getting their heads wrapped around it. And Chris, I think, but before we maybe move on to the economic update and talk maybe a bit about markets this week and what's coming up, were there any highlights for you from 2019 and in terms of the investment management piece?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think there was a couple from me. I think firstly is the one that you mentioned at the start, which was just the incredible inflows that we saw into the True Potential portfolios and funds. So I think it was around about 2.7 billion. If we look since launch, we've received inflows of around about 8 billion. And that's pretty incredible when you think about what's happening in the background with other asset management firms. It's not particularly easy out there right now. So I think for me, that's pretty incredible. I think outside of that, 2019 was a great year for performance overall. You saw equity markets were very, very strong, and then that filtered through into the portfolio performance. So if we look at our most popular portfolio, which is the balanced portfolio, I think that was up around about 13% over the year, which is great. If we look at that, I guess since launch, so since October 2015, portfolio's up around about 36%. But I guess, thinking about is the way that we could compare that to what other people are doing in the industry. And one thing that we look at is something called ARC. And ARC, it's basically the industry average. And if you look over the lifetime of the portfolios, Barnes portfolio's up plus 36%, but ARC's only up plus 26%. So again, you can see the portfolios have done a really, really good job compared to other people within the industry now. So from my perspective, 2019 was a great year.
Yeah, so ARC, as you mentioned, Chris, is peer groups. It's other fund discretionary managers out there. So it's a great benchmark to compare us against. And I think when you look at that, so that 36% increase, which is in our balanced fund, which is our best seller. So you're right to pick that, Chris. It's worth bearing in mind just why we all invest, which is these are meant to be medium to longer term vehicles. So when you look at, say, the markets over the last few weeks, this is just a tiny part of how long your investment should be with us. And bearing in mind 36% growth, if you've been with us 4 years, nearly 5 years, invested wise, you'd still be up right now. And that's the thing to bear in mind for everybody. Chris, you also mentioned the inflows, which I think are really important, because I think if you're in the industry, those type of inflows are, kind of top of the pops at the moment in terms of other groups out there. For the end investor, what does that mean in terms of True Potential? Does it mean that the price of investing comes down? Does it mean we get better intelligence from the fund managers? Does it mean, what positives does the end investors take from those inflows?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. I mean, I think what it really does is it basically gives us scale. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the more money that comes into the True Potential portfolios, the more access that we have to our fund managers. So, for example, I don't really want to sit down with the sales guy who tells me everything's fine and everything's going to be great. I want to sit down with the person that's taking the decision. So the fund manager, the CIO, the person who's really going to tell me exactly what they're thinking and how that's then playing into their decision taking. I think outside of that, though, you're completely right in the sense that with scale, you have the ability to reduce cost. And if we take, say, the balanced portfolio as the best example, probably, when we first launched in October 2015, it was pricing at 0.93% per year. And it's now pricing at 0.83%. So again, that's quite a significant reduction in what's only quite a short period of time. But all of this comes from scale. I mean, when we first launched the portfolios, we were probably getting, I'd say, 30 million a month. We're now getting north of 300 million a month. I mean, it's pretty incredible when you look at the inflows that are coming in. but that's genuinely beneficial for the end investor.
Yeah, no, scale means a great deal, Chris. I think it does. It gives you better sway with the managers, as you see. You're kind of not speaking to the sales guy anymore. You're actually speaking to the people who make the decisions. But also that buying power really helps. And I think the other thing which helps me in terms of the management team as well is it opens doors with other fund groups as well. So when we're looking at creating new fund product, which then sits within the TPP portfolios, having that kind of scale and that ability really helps. And that's why I think we've attracted some kind of world-class names, with, Goldman Sachs, UBS, UBS creating a specific fund just for us, Allianz, and on we go really from there. So that scale really helps. And Greg, just to come across to you on the scale point of view, and because you deal with a lot of advisors on a daily basis, as you mentioned, is that scale good for the advisors when they're dealing with their clients in terms of messaging?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a scale point of view, one of the benefits of True Potential's software is, again, similar to the message Dianne said, which is whether a client's got a £50 a month direct debit to start making, or whether they've got a £500,000 transfer to deal with. Using technology means they can be done in the same manner, but also from dealing with their clients, they have no upper cap or upper limit of clients that they can deal with at any one time. So using the software from a scalability point of view lets them look after, 200, 300, 400, which is the amount of clients they normally come to us with when they're recruited. But quite easily and quite quickly, they realise using our technology, they don't have to close their doors to new business. They don't have to, at a minimum or maximum investment level, which some, non-True Potential advisors have done in the past. And it then allows us to work with the advisors on, the likes of closing the savings gap, which means if they do have the son or daughter of an existing client who wants to start, just finished university, maybe wants to start doing some saving, again, using the technology, they're able to do that quite seamlessly. And also, over time, will allow them to adjust their charges downwards, which is the biggest trend I think that we've seen across our advisor board, is they're able to make more money, as I alluded to, the 217 million, but actually lower it per client because they're able to increase their client count. So the advisors very much count on that side of the tech.
Yeah, and I think that's always been part of True Potential's business model, Greg, which is we start with the very end client or the end investor in mind, and if we can give them good performance and a great cost, then they're happy with that product, which then in turn passes across the advisor, makes it easier for the advisor to advise on that to more clients than ever before, and then finally also True Potential benefit. So we're very much upside down in terms of that approach. If you look at traditional businesses out there who start with themselves, but how can we make as much money as possible? Then how do we get the advisors on board? Then how do we sell that to the clients? We've all started the other way around there. So it's good to hear that it's getting well received by the advisors, Greg. To move on really away from the 2019 report. Chris, could you just give us an update on this week in the markets, please, and just let our listeners know what's going on?
Yeah, sure, Dan. So it's been an interesting week, as is every week over the past few weeks. I think maybe from my perspective, if I start with actually just how the markets have been doing, I'd say over the past 3 weeks, because you might actually be surprised by this. So if we look at when the markets bottomed out, which would have been March the 23rd, the US market is up over 25% since then. The UK market is up around about 15% since then. And that is probably something that hasn't really been reported in the headlines very much.
Not at all.
Because they've been concentrating on the negatives. But what you've seen is that actually stock markets have recovered quite significantly. If we home in on this week the US has led the way. So US is up around about 4%. The tech side, so the NASDAQ's up around about 7%. I guess the big news was Donald Trump last night coming out and saying that he now has a plan as to how the US exits the lockdown. So a 3-phase plan, which is controlled by the individual states, and the markets that provide certainty, and the markets have really liked that. So you've seen markets be quite strong on the back of that. And the reality is the markets, they really have been led by the news around the coronavirus. But you've got to remember that actually a lot of this news is quite positive. You know, if you think about what's been happening with central banks, with governments, the incredible stimulus that you're seeing coming through. You know, even in the UK, we've seen 80% of workers' salaries protected. You know, it's incredible, and all of this has happened really, really quickly, which is very different to what we've seen with previous events in the past. So, from my perspective, you know, markets are becoming more stable. Volatility has been reduced. You know, if you look at the various different measures of volatility that we can look at, you can see that it has significantly come down. We are further through the coronavirus than we were 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, which may sound a little bit stupid me saying that, but it's true. And the reality is that central banks, governments, health authorities, they're learning with how to deal with this, and we're starting to get through it. And that is starting to be reflected within stock market return overall.
And first point, Chris, you never sound stupid saying anything, so don't worry about that. But
it's on camera, mate, Dan. You go Taylor.
That's right. It's on the record now, Chris. So there you go.
It is.
But it's great to hear, and I think you're right, Chris, about the last 3 weeks. I mentioned this myself on the podcast last week when we'd had 2 weeks of green, so to speak, on the board, and now it looks like we're going to have a third consecutive week of that. And you're right, that's not getting mentioned anywhere. And indeed, I still speak to the odd end investor directors. They'll sometimes write to me and things, and they're saying, well, their portfolios are down, and I'm like, log in, check. It's actually not down as much as you think now. Stop listening to the news as much, because bad news sells, unfortunately. Yes, we do get the odd good news story which sells, such as the gentleman who's enjoying his 100th birthday, marching up and down his garden and things like that. That is a genuine good news story. It's raised a lot of cash, and it's made a lot of people smile. So that's what you call a soft news story, good news story. A hard good news story, which is 3 weeks of market growth, not that interesting. It's unfortunately, it should be interesting because it's about our money, or it's about everybody's money. But I think I would urge people to log into their apps and check things. And Dianne, on that point, the development team, they've just updated how we handle valuations, haven't they, on people's mobile apps and on their websites?
Yeah, we have. We've just promoted again. It's a lot of what we do is behind the scenes, so it might not necessarily be evident to an end user. But yeah, the valuations. I think previously they were kind of running within 48 hours of knowing what the value was, and we're now same day or within 24 hours. So I think we're possibly the first business in the UK to be able to do that. Yeah.
Certainly for mutual funds that we invest in, that type of pricing is great. And that was really based direct on end investor feedback. When they've been tracking volatility at the moment, we had some emails at times when the markets would go up and a client would log in the next day and say, oh, I'm not up. Why aren't I up as well? And probably 2 points of note on that. That was because of the previous delay, which you alluded to, Dianne, which we've now brought out that new bit of technology for that. So it's going to be a much more live update. The other point probably to mention, and probably one for you, Chris, is that although markets going up or down is a proxy for what our end investors' portfolio should look like, it's probably not the definitive, because we're not tracker funds, are we? We're invested in different instruments.
No, absolutely not. I think, from our perspective, we invest in what we call multi-asset. So it's not just invested in equity markets, it's invested in bonds, it's invested in different currencies, it's invested in different precious metals, it's invested a little bit in property, it's invested in so many different ways of trying to offer what we call diversification.
Yeah.
So diversification is basically a proven way to help investors deal with the volatility like we've just seen recently. And what you're doing is you're spreading your risk around lots of different assets. So what will happen is, the portfolios obviously will either benefit or detract when equity markets go up or down. But there are so many other moving parts within the portfolio that have the ability to help add to return, to smooth volatility, which is a great feature of the portfolios themselves.
Good. Yeah. And that's a point which Jeff and Mark have made in the past, but I think it's good to hear it from you as well, Chris, because I think it really does bang home that message of diversification and the fact that we're multi-asset. So it's not just about the equity markets, it's about all those other instruments. Not having all your eggs in one basket is my easier way of saying diversification.
We've just passed Easter, so that makes sense.
We have, although I haven't finished eating all my Easter eggs yet. This is the peril of living with a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old as well, is that there's quite the stockpile of Easter eggs in the house. You can only give kids so much chocolate, otherwise they explode.
Oh, of course.
Not explode physically, but explode with kind of anger and excitement and things like that. So we've been rationing the chocolate, but unfortunately that means mum and dad on the night time are also stealing the chocolate. So I could,
Dad, I really feel for you. It must be awful.
It's the ultimate first world problem, but it is a problem nonetheless, Dianne. As they say in Bad Boys 2, this is a stupid problem to have, but it is a problem nonetheless. So it's that's a little mention for you, Greg, because I know Bad Boys 2 is a favourite film of yours. So.
Top 10. Top 10. Mine, yeah.
Yeah. And kind of let's jump across, please, to last night's news. I think Chris mentioned obviously the positive news coming out of the United States about Trump and his 3-phase plan. But also we had Dominic Raab speaking last night as well. We're about 3.5 weeks into the last lockdown, and we've just been told 3 more weeks, or at least 3 more weeks, which, although he hasn't given a definitive date, I would estimate is going to take us past the next bank holiday. We've obviously got the next bank holiday has been moved because of VED, so I think it's going to be on Friday the 8th of May, rather than say the normal Monday which we'd have in May. And I think it would probably be a safe bet to say we're not going to see the end of the current lockdown cycle until after that bank holiday is out the way. So, if we look at ourselves, I'm at home in Northumberland in the garden. It's where I've been for 3 and a bit weeks now. Dianne, you're in Newcastle. You're closer to the city centre. Chris, you've went down to London because that's where your partner lives. And Greg, you're in and out of the office, really, or not. Yes. in and out too much before people get worried, but you're managing a site 2 side of things. So I just thought it would be a good opportunity really to talk about how the 3 of you are finding lockdown in its different guises. So I'll start with you, please, Greg.
Yeah, I obviously you stole my thunder from earlier, which was I've not got the same interior designer as True Potential. This is the office. We are open, albeit in a very different guise, really. It's not the office as we once knew it. So we've got a team of 9 out of 315 working inside of the office. We informally call it Site 2, but everybody in here just calls it the office because it's normal for us to just come to work every day. It's kind of, it has actually become normal. What's good about it? Well, my commute to work's gone down from 50 minutes to about 19 minutes is as quick as I can get it. I'm not sad I've been timing it.
I hope you keep it on the speed limits though, Greg, are you?
You know me, Daniel. You know, keep within the
straight as an arrow. Yeah.
Straight as an arrow. But no, the roads are quiet, and for me that's great. Coming to work and knowing that I am, deemed a key worker. I've never been called a key worker or essential in my life. But here we go, a pandemic happens and I'm all of a sudden essential. But it's good when I'm coming to work that there's no traffic, because it means the message is being delivered that people are where they can work from home. And I chat with the team. Yeah, there's 8 others that are doing things like opening checks, dealing with posts, doing really physical tasks that need to be done, that can't be done from home. And on a serious note, it's kind of, good for us that we come in and do it. It's good that we're making sure people's money's invested. We've just been through a tax year end, which for us was absolutely seamless. But what it meant is if we received the check on Friday the 3rd, I think it was able to be handled and administered that day. So it was put into the last tax year and not the current one. So we are doing a lot of serious tasks. And what's good about it, we've all got our own wing inside of the office. So the meeting room I'm in now is now my office. And when we get back to normal, I'm using squatters' rights to keep it.
Yeah.
So I'm not giving up my office. But yeah, it's been actually for me very good coming to work every day. I'm a man of routine. I like things in a certain way. So the commute to work's been good, I think, for me to get out of the house. And I keep in touch with my team who are back at home, and I know they're kind of all trying to build up new routines, which I don't think will be very good for me.
Yeah, and you're only called a key worker, Greg, by the way, because you've got the keys.
That makes sense.
So that's what it means.
That now makes sense. Yeah.
It now makes sense. But just a word of warning for you, Chris. Greg's obviously in the wing of the office where you sit. So bad news
That's
for
very
you.
true, isn't it? Yeah. I have to sit outside.
You'll have to sit outside like me. It's not recommended. I was telling you at the start before we started recording. So today I've got a t-shirt on, I've got a shirt on, I've got a jumper, I've got a gilet, and I've got my blanket again as well. So
you didn't mention that earlier on.
Always keep a surprise for live. It's a TV tip. But no, it's so I'm similar to you, Greg. It's I do love a routine, and I've found it's taken me 3 weeks really to get. Last week I was well and truly in the groove of it, I think, but this week more so. So it's becoming more normal working from home. I wouldn't say I like it. There are some things I like. I like saying I've actually forced myself to have a lunch break. I put it in my diary now. It's something I don't ever do when I'm at home, but I've actually booked a lunch break in, and so it's nice in some ways because it means I'm seeing my wife, I'm seeing Gemma more often. I don't know if she likes that, but tough. But I'm also seeing the kids as well, so it's quite nice having a bit of having breakfast with the children in the morning and then having lunch with them. But yeah, I'd much rather be in the office, seeing everybody and speaking to everybody. So it's not all bad in sight too, I guess, Greg. Even if you have nicked our furniture in Chris's office.
Well, I've also got my own stash of Lotus biscuits, which is good and bad. So we're running out of supplies. I think that's mainly because I'm greedy.
That's bad news. That's bad news for any guests who come to the office. For anybody who hasn't been to the Newcastle head office before. You tend to get.
Well, I've also got access to a coffee machine as well, which isn't good.
No, I've noticed my coffee intake's gone down actually since I've been at home, so that's not a bad thing. Chris, you're obviously based in Newcastle, but your partner, she lives down in London, and you've decided to spend the lockdown holiday or period or whatever we call it down in London. How's that?
It's good. It's very odd in the sense that when you think of going to London, you think of things like the pubs, the restaurants, the shops, and literally absolutely everything's shut. I went for a bike ride last Saturday, and I went down Oxford Street. And it's obviously one of the busiest shopping streets in the world, and there wasn't anyone there. So it's quite odd. It's a bit like a ghost town.
Yeah.
I think from my own personal perspective, I think it's been good, but it's not something that I'd like to do over the longer term. I think I miss speaking face to face to the team. We have 2 meetings a day. So we have 2 video meetings, one at 9 o'clock and one at 4:30. But again, you're not having as much contact. You can obviously pick up the phone, which is what we do. But I also think I miss the social side of the office as well. Just walking around, talking to people, finding out what they're up to, which you don't really have as much. But I think from an investment team perspective, everything's worked incredibly well. We've got full access to all of our systems, trading, research. So yeah, it's been interesting, been very different.
Yeah. And I know that you and the team, Chris, were virtually in, I should say, on Good Friday as well.
Yeah, so basically we had the first half of our investment meeting on the morning of Good Friday. In some ways that was really my fault, because it then gives me more time to have the second half of the investment meeting, which was on Tuesday. But I think the reality is there's so much happening all the time. We're in constant contact with the managers, but also news is basically moving into markets very, very quickly. So that means that, once you've got that information, that research, you need to act on that quickly, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So that's why we had that Good Friday meeting.
And are you finding, Chris, that you're speaking to, you've mentioned you speak to the team twice daily. Are you speaking to the managers more often now as well?
Yeah, I think, probably speaking to the managers, I'd say maybe 3 times a week. I mean, it's interesting because they're our main source of research. They're interested in speaking to us as well. They're interested to hear what we're seeing. They're very interested to hear what our other managers are doing as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, from my perspective, we speak to them quite a lot.
No, it's good, and I think part of the work I know you do when you mentioned about the rebalancing side of things, you write some commentary on there as well, which we share with our end investors. And Dianne, am I right in saying that gets pushed through the client sites as well, like the rebalance summary? Yeah,
absolutely, yeah, it does.
Where would that be found?
So it's on the overview page.
Yeah.
So when you log in, you've also got the summary as you scroll down through your website. You can see it underneath your investments as well.
Great. So that's a nice summary of kind of where any movements have happened in your particular portfolio. So that's where the rationale behind any decisions is shared from the investment team.
Absolutely, yes. And you can see it within your investment as well. If you drill down into one of your investments, you can also see it there.
Great. I think that's quite a little known feature at times. So it's right. Good just to remind people of that. And Di, moving across to you now. So I mentioned you're close to Newcastle city centre. How are you finding the lockdown? You've got a job similar to mine, and as far as it's a lot of meetings and a lot of organisation of the teams.
Yeah. So for me, just based on what Chris said there, I don't really know how I feel about this, because I know I'm at home, but when I'm talking to people on the phone, the only place I can picture anybody is in the office. So when we're talking about this lockdown and Chris is saying Oxford Street's empty, I haven't really seen any of that. So it's quite hard for me. I'm quite a visual person. It's hard for me to accept that everybody's at home. It's like nothing's really changed. But so for me, it's peaceful. It's it's like I've got a house that I'm in alone from time to time. But yeah, so we have morning stand-ups, we have meetings about how things are going. We have obviously a lot of planning to do in order to meet deadlines and objectives. But just as a quick point of note, I think we have been we've been at the forefront of kind of knowing predicting what might happen next in terms of lockdown and coronavirus. And I think you, Greg, and I, the day before Boris Johnson actually came out and said, yes, the country is going into lockdown, we sat in a meeting room for 10-15 minutes and discussed, how does the end client get what the end client wants if everything has to stop? If we are told nobody goes anywhere, a lot like Italy, what do we do? And within 15 to 20 minutes, we'd drawn up what was a very heavy paper-based process into a digital process. And within 8 days, the team had managed to build what we had kind of decided should no longer be a paper-based process. So I think that's testament to the fact that we can work remotely and we can still do our jobs very well by being a remote worker as opposed to having to be in the office. And yes, sometimes it's frustrating, because where you would ordinarily look across and see whether somebody's at a desk or in a call or they're in a meeting somewhere, you can kind of park your thought for a little while and come back to it when you see them again. And for me, some of the frustrations born out of, we now have 3 mediums of contact. We've got Teams, we've got Skype, well, we've got email, and we've also got mobile phones. So I tried to speak to Greg yesterday. When Greg called me back, I was in a Teams call with Jamie. As I was on the Teams call with Jamie, somebody tried to contact on Skype, and you're kind of going, oh, where do I answer? What do I do first?
Yeah.
And I just have to prioritise you all by either rank or who I'd like to speak to more than I would somebody else.
Better always choose who I'd like to speak to.
Well, I'll try that. Yeah.
Just ignore the rest. Oh, not him or not her.
Yeah.
No, and that's a funny one actually, Dianne, because I found this week is Gemma, my wife, was saying to me this morning, I can't believe it's Friday today. It's what a funny week. And I said, I'm glad it's Friday. I said, I'm knackered this week. I've probably had 9 or 10 calls every day and like meetings effectively. And it's a strange one. More than anything now, I think I'm more contactable than I've been. I think normally if you're in the office, you're sat in a meeting room and people say, oh, well, Dan's in the meeting room, so I can't speak to him now. But because you can't physically see that, it's I'll just pick the phone up, I'll send an email or send a message. So yeah, that's actually an interesting point, one I hadn't considered. They say everybody, we'll look to wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes, but we'll look to finish on this. They say that it takes 21 days to master a habit. So we've all been in this lockdown environment for more than 21 days now. Has anybody formed good or bad habits?
Well, my posture, I think, could do with some work anyway. But I originally was just in the dining room downstairs because it was the easiest place with the biggest space with the biggest table. But I couldn't move away from work because it was somewhere that I was walking through consistently. I'd see the PC and I'd be like, I'll just check emails, or so I had to make a conscious decision to move Neil out of his little man cave. I've occupied his space now. So for me, it's not so much of a habit, but I had to make a conscious decision to draw the line between home and work in order to be able to survive, I think. But again, I'm just slouch. I mean, I've sat here and I've been trying to sit up. Now you can see Greg and Chris.
That's it. Everyone's like that.
I'm in a proper chair as well, and I'm still.
No.
But yeah, I feel I am more hunched because I don't have the appropriate working area that I would have at work. So my habit, I'm going to have to try and roll back the shoulders.
What you should get, Dianne, I noticed exactly the same. My posture's shocking, full stop anyway. It doesn't matter if I'm at home or at the office. I've got a band at home, like a red, a physio band.
Yeah.
So I pull it apart like that.
Right.
Every hour, we do 25 pull aparts. And that's actually helped.
Yeah.
So by the end of it, your shoulders are sore from the back, which is good because it's pulling it apart. Now, I've got a friend who was a physio, and that was his top tip. So get yourself a...
As exercise. So would I be technically exercising? Because I'm not sure I do that either.
You'd be technically exercising, but the good news is you can sit down and do it. So it's
half and half. Happy
half and half. Exactly that. So Dianne, your habits really been kind of separating work and also trying to correct your posture.
Yes.
Greg.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know if this is it's a good habit for me, but it's a bad one for the dog, unfortunately, which is although I'm commuting to work and the like, I'm still following all of the government advice, which is 1 walk a day. Our dog walker has been cancelled, so the dog unfortunately now gets 2 walks a day, 1 from me, 1 from my other half, Jenny. But we take our full hour walk with the dog. Now, most dogs would love an hour's walk, but I'm pretty sure an overweight pug, it's probably about this big but weighs about 10 kilograms, probably doesn't enjoy the walks as much. So yeah, I guess for me the good habit I've picked up is I go for at least an hour's walk every day just to get some fresh air, some exercise. Unfortunately, where we live, we have plenty of open fields and the like, so we aren't bumping into people and the like. So even on a weekend now, I've been setting the alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning, getting out nice and early and taking the dog out. So yeah, I'm loving it. The dog's not. She's used to a 5-minute walk around the block.
And you've been bringing her in the office sometimes as well, haven't you, Greg?
Yeah, I got told off by the team today for not bringing the dog in. So yeah, we just because the dog's a bit of a clingy thing, it doesn't leave your side. We've been taking shifts with the dog as well, which is something I never imagined I'd do, is bring the dog to work, and it's become normal now that there's a pug running around the office causing all sorts of chaos. So
get it to sit on Chris's chair. You should have a nice nap on there. And Chris, I know that you will have picked up many positive habits and no bad ones at all during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with Greg, actually, in the sense that I do go for a full hour's walk every day. I think it's really nice just getting outside, getting some sunlight. I think on the negative side, where I sit is right next to the fridge, which probably isn't the greatest thing, in the sense that whenever I want a break, I tend to walk over to the fridge and open it, even though I already know what's in there. And then I guess the final thing, I don't know if I think this is probably actually bad, but it's not a habit I'd want to get into, is I got my girlfriend to cut my hair last night, which is not necessarily something that I'd regularly like to do. But
it looks all right, Chris. That looks good.
It doesn't look too bad. No. Yeah.
Well,
there you go.
You've got another haircut friend there with Greg. I mean, Jenny did your hair, Greg. Is that right?
I have to admit,
that looks smart.
She did a good. Yeah, it's going to save us 40 quid a month now, because she's going to start cutting it going forward, I think. So yeah, I'm quite happy with the results, actually. And I'd planned on shaving it all off, and Jenny said she's going to have a go. So I could have been doing this with hair looking like you, Chris, so I'm pleased that I don't.
And Dianne, have you been cutting Neil's hair, or has Neil been trying to cut yours?
No, well, that's why mine's tied up, because I just have this mane that I can't do anything with now. So yes, I did try to cut his hair, but I was more, well, as you know, I mean, both Greg and Dan know Neil. He's not shy. And yes, he just said, please, honestly, he had a mullet here. And he's ginger, so I mean, that's not great. So he said, will you? And I have absolutely no idea. I can barely do my own hair, let alone cutting his. He was all for it. He said, I'll just go to work and he'll be like, your last cut your hair? He said, and I'll say, yeah, what have you got to say about it? So I took the smallest amounts off. Yeah. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. So there's no way I'm doing it again. I'm not.
No. Well, as you can see, I'm getting worse and worse by the day. I can't get any clippers. I've tried. It seems to be your Amazons and your Boots.com and what have you have sold out of clippers. Unless you get like a beard clipper, and my hair's quite thick. Oh, I hope it is anyway. So imagine with a beard clipper, there'd just be clumps going on.
It would pull more out.
I think it would. So I don't know what to do. I also don't really want Gemma cutting my hair. I'm not as brave as Chris or Greg. I think I'll end up sculpt. I'll end up looking like you, Chris. I think if I end up with the clippers in the house. So I don't know. I'm at an interesting kind of juncture at the moment about what to do with this hair. So we'll see week by week, everybody, what happens. Especially 3 more weeks. I don't know if I can bear it, but we'll see. We'll see.
You have to be brave.
We do have to be brave. We've got to stay safe and be brave.
Yes.
For my hair. Yes. We're going to look to wrap it up, Dianne, Chris and Greg. But before we do, any final comments from yourselves? Anything we've missed today?
I just think we have to appreciate how lucky we are. We can still work. We're still working full time. Sales figures, amazing in terms of times of turmoil like this, when people are going to inevitably be worried about not just their immediate future, but their long-term future as well. And anything that we can do to try and alleviate that worry and that stress, we do. And I don't think True Potential gets, again, as much as the platform was never really known about because we did it and we quietly get on with it. I don't think True Potential gets the press it deserves in terms of what it does for, in times like this, for end clients as well as the advisors. So I just genuinely do appreciate the fact that I'm still sat here, and that's testament to you and the senior team and the drive that you've got and the kind of forethought as to how we survive and what we do moving forwards. How are we going to be and remain a market leader? And that it's constant. And it's mind blowing at times, but yes.
No, thank you, Dianne. Thank you. I genuinely think it's a responsibility of a private business to be a force for good. And a force for good is the fact we haven't furloughed any members of staff. Everybody's working full time. We do not take for granted any pound that is invested with us or any advisor business that's with us as well. So because we don't take it for granted, we have a huge responsibility to make sure it is business as usual and make sure that we continue to safeguard that money in the good times and the bad times, or indeed in the indifferent times as well. I think we've mentioned before that kind of tough times don't last, but tough people or tough firms do. And we certainly class ourselves as a tough firm, a resilient firm, an anti-fragile firm, really, to use one of David's phrases from the past when he quoted that anti-fragile book. Chris or Greg, any final thoughts from yourselves, gents?
I guess just for me, Dan, and obviously echoing Dianne's comment, is really for advisors, for clients and the like. We're here, is my message. I ran a stat, again, another boring stat for me, but people like stats, I think. So we looked over January and February, the average call time. People were on hold getting through to True Potential, and it was 31 seconds, which is great when you compare that across the industry, but indeed just the wider kind of UK calling any company and getting the call answered in 31 seconds is great. Since we've gone into lockdown, the average has gone down to 19 seconds. So we've actually reduced the average wait in getting through to a member of the team, but we've increased the volume of what we're receiving. And I think that is because people are a lot sharper working from home, because the numbers proves that they're working. So there's actually a race now to, answer the phone and pick up the call and what have you. And actually one of the days when we've seen a sort of particularly larger market decrease, we got the average call down to 7 seconds waiting to get through, and that was customers and financial advisors. And we compare that with our competition, and I'll not name names, but I mean, if you have any assets with any other companies, worth having a look at this. But many of them have turned the phone lines off. One company's just had to order 4,000 laptops for their staff to work from home, whereas Dianne mentioned we were ready 8:30 a.m. the next day. That wasn't even 12 hours after Boris Johnson made the announcement. So yeah, we're here for everybody really, whether it's colleagues, whether it's advisors or indeed clients. And do try and test us out if you want to try and prove me wrong. I'm more than happy for people to give
careful what you wish for, Greg.
Yeah, careful with that. But is there a record, Greg, for answering the phone the fastest?
Well, I certainly know who will hold the record, and I'm not sure what the record is, but I know Abbas Jamil, one of our sort of support operators. I'm pretty sure he's built a system that answers the phone, quicker than is humanly possible. And I've never met a more competitive guy who wants to answer the phone quicker. So Abbas probably does, 600 things a day, but he also does them faster than anybody else. So I don't know whether he's maybe outsourcing it to China. Maybe I don't know. He's got a good.
Yeah. Who knows what Abbas, as well as him being the fastest operator, he's also the loudest operator.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just as you said that there, I instantly pictured Abbas spelling his name out as he does for his email address.
Yes.
Yeah, shouting out Abbas, Abbas. Yeah. Fond memories, Abbas, if you're listening. And Chris, anything last from you, mate?
Yeah, I guess, from my perspective, you have seen improvement in markets. You have seen more stability come through. You have seen a reduction in volatility. I think the reality is that stock markets are dealing with the coronavirus, as is each individual country. And the fact that we're at work, or most of us are working from home right now, is an example of that. A lockdown is the way that you actually get through the coronavirus. One thing, I guess, from the investment team's perspective, I wouldn't mind plugging something new, which is basically a new series of videos that we do. So you'll all know that we do our daily morning market video which is just really around, what's happening within markets overnight in that day. We're also bi-weekly going to be doing a chart of the week. So basically picking out charts that we think are interesting, that are leading into decision taking within the True Potential portfolios. And you'll have, I think this week I've done a couple of them. And then next week we're going to get some of our analysts to do it as well. So again, videos just to give you more information and more communication to help you understand what's happening within the investment world.
And are you going to be sharing them on Facebook, Chris? Is that the idea?
Yeah, it'll be through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, through the True Potential YouTube channel, potentially through Instagram. I'm trying to think of if I've forgotten of any of the others. Please jump in and let me know.
All social media, Chris.
All social media is probably, that's the better way of doing it.
Apart from Snapchat and apart from TikTok now. Snapchat, because I'm not sure what that does. And TikTok, I definitely don't know what TikTok's about. And nor do I need to know either. So I will forever let that be a mystery to me. Well, Grant, and Chris, if I was on the BBC, I would have cut you off there because that was a sponsored promotion virtually.
Yep.
It was. Sorry.
No, but that's okay. We're a private organisation, Chris, and it's all good. So yeah, we'll let you off this time. But Grant, Greg, Dianne, thank you very much for your first attendance on the podcast. We might have you back. And Chris, welcome back as well. But thank you to the three of you for today. I've really enjoyed it. Not that I don't enjoy speaking to you all normally, but this has been good. And hopefully, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, you've enjoyed it as well. I hope you all have a good weekend. 3 more weeks in lockdown, so to speak, in the UK. So stay strong, keep busy, keep fit. Use some of the habits, get your hours walking, as everybody's mentioned. Do your posture, cut your own hair, or get your wife or your boyfriend or your husband or whoever to cut your hair as well. But, thank you, everybody, and we'll speak to you next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.